Hello and welcome to my Victorious Souls podcast live interview today. I have the joy of bringing you a lovely lady named Carrie Rickert. And she is a coach. She is a trauma survivor. And she's going to be sharing her story of how she journeyed through a traumatic brain injury. So I will bring her in here, but not just the traumatic brain injury, but also depression. I didn't want to forget that. I almost forgot that. Depression on top of that. I mean, a traumatic brain injury is, I had someone on the podcast recently with that already, but it's a big deal. And I'm just thrilled to bring her out here. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive. That lady on the internet who loves you. And bringing Carrie out here to share her story of journeying through that traumatic brain injury. Welcome, Carrie. Thank you for being on the podcast with me.
Oh, Danielle, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I told them that you had a traumatic brain injury. You're a coach, and how you journeyed through not just the injury, but depression. But what was your life like before this turn of events in your life?
Sure. So I will take you back to just before the accident. So I was living on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I was working in Baltimore, 60 plus hours a week. I had two kids, 8 and 4. And I was newly separated from my then husband. So the kids and I had just moved into a new condo, and we were trying to figure out the whole custody arrangements and all that stuff. And I'm working a ton, and I've got one kid in daycare and one kid in elementary school. And so life was chaos, as you can imagine.
It sounds like it.
and then on the day of the accident, I was at work, and we were going to a lunch, like a team lunch kind of thing, an activity, because we had been packing up the office to then move offices. So to kind of celebrate that, I guess we were going to an activity and to lunch. And a coworker of mine and I decided to ride together. I was driving, and it was raining very hard. I don't remember any of this at all. The last thing I remember actually is the ride down the elevator from the office to my car. I remember nothing else of this. But I've put together the pieces here and there, right? So Emily and I got in the car, and we were driving, and we exited off of 95 onto 100, and it was like torrential downpours. Wow. And there was a tractor trailer parked on the shoulder, and I hydroplaned into the back of that tractor trailer. So both Emily and I were injured. Emily broke both of her arms. She had a 4-month-old baby at the time. And then so evidently it took like a half an hour, 45 minutes for them to get us out of the car. They couldn't take us to the hospital via helicopter because of the weather. But they took me to University of Maryland Shock Trauma. They took Emily there as well. And at Shock Trauma, I remember waking up, or however it happened, that I was like aware of things happening. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, this seems like the right place for me to be right now. I don't know why I wasn't scared. I don't know why I didn't. I mean, I was surrounded by people that I knew and loved. So, I think probably that abated the fear a little bit. I also didn't really understand what was going on. So it turned out that I had basically just crushed my left hand. And so that had to be completely reconstructed. I'd broken every bone in my face. They weren't displaced, so I didn't look, my mom says I looked horrible, but I didn't look like, like it wasn't like, they all healed really nicely. But like broken jaw, broken, my eye sockets, like everything was broken. I damaged my left ear, so I have no more hearing in my left ear, and that is permanent. That will be with me forever. And my left vocal cord was paralyzed. Fortunately, that has been fixed or just healed over time. And I had a traumatic brain injury, and along with the brain injury, I ended up having an aneurysm around my brainstem. So I had some pretty major catastrophic things going on. So it was pretty touch and go there for a while. I couldn't speak well because of my vocal cord. So it was hard to communicate, but it wasn't actually like, I didn't have a whole lot of cognitive dysfunction. I mean, I had problems remembering words and, processing things a little bit slower, but for the most part, I was able to communicate. I could write. I mean, unfortunately, it was my left hand, not my writing hand. And, I was lucky in a lot of ways, but, so I ended up getting 4 stents in my left carotid artery because I had damaged my carotid. The aneurysm repair was a 10-hour surgery. And the absolute longest you can be under radiation at one time. So that was fun. But I remember the doctor coming in, and this was all like over a couple of weeks that all of these things and surgeries and everything happened. They didn't happen all at once. The first thing they did was put a drain in my head and to reduce the swelling. Then they could see what was actually going on. So the doctor came in to talk to me, and I credit Dr. Jindal with saving my life multiple times. But he came in and he said, Carrie, you have this aneurysm and it's growing very quickly. Like, we need to fix it. And I'm like, okay, so tell me what's going to happen in the surgery? And he's like, well, there's a really high chance you could have a stroke and never be the same. And I said, okay, so what happens if I don't have the surgery? And he said, oh, you'll die. And I'm like, looks like you're going to have to do a really good job on this surgery and fix me up. And this poor man, God love him, I still see him for follow-up appointments. I joke when I feel uncomfortable, and he didn't quite get that. So like, he was like, and I'm like, better fix me. I'm going to work my hardest. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he did. I mean, my goodness, I was so very fortunate where my accident was located that I got to go to University of Maryland Shock Trauma because it is one of the best trauma hospitals around, and that the doctors who are the best of the best choose to practice at trauma. Because I got to see those doctors. My orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Penzi, was absolutely amazing. I mean, my hand is functional. I can type. I still have trouble with things like zippers and like string cheese, opening packages. But other than that, I mean, like, nobody expected me to have a functioning left hand. no one expected me to be mostly the same after that aneurysm surgery. And besides the one incident of, turns out I'm allergic to Haldol and it makes me hallucinate. So like I was speaking quite nonsense when I came out of that surgery. So everybody was terrified that I had had a stroke. And I may have had like a minor one, but it was like nothing was catastrophic. And once they realized it was the medication and stopped giving me that medication, I started communicating again. Like, and then I started acute therapy. So I did speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. I was also lucky enough, my lower body was not damaged. So I was able, minus some balance issues, which physical therapy helped with, I was able to basically get around. I had a big neck brace on, my arm was all like casted up, and I had these crazy hooks, like metal hooks on the ends of my fingers because they had put metal pieces like down the fingers. And I remember saying to my surgeon, I'm like, Dr. Penzie, I have paper clips on the ends of my hands. Like it looked like bent paper clips, like as you open them up, it was like the hooks look like paper clips. He's like, those are really expensive paper clips, Carrie.
That makes me think of the Marvel character. I think it's Wolverine, who has the
Yes,
claws coming out. So
yes,
you were like a superhero.
it was kind of like that. Yeah. So, I spent 4 weeks in shock trauma, and my mom stayed with me the entire time, except the like couple of nights that my brother forced her to go home. And he's like, I'll stay. It's fine. You go home, you sleep. And she only actually went as far as his house because her house was an hour further. And she's like, I can't go all the way home. But she was there. She slept in a chair for a month. And my mom is a retired nurse, so she did ICU and rehab. So she at least knew the lay of the land. She understood what the doctors were saying. She could advocate for me better than anyone else. And
right, because that's a very familiar setting for her. So
right.
Wow, that was quite advantageous.
Yes. And I was super lucky too, because my ex-husband and I were not yet divorced. So he had power of attorney over me, and he signed that away to my mom, which was absolutely wonderful because he knew that he shouldn't be the one making those decisions, and that my mom was best suited to that. And so I'm eternally grateful to him for that, and for he and his family really picking up the slack and taking care of the kids, because I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. There wasn't a whole lot I could do there, but my mom does laugh at me still, because she's like, when you woke up in the hospital, you're like, don't forget to tell Steve Simon has Boy Scouts and Allie has dance. And she's like, how do you even know this? I'm like, isn't it such and such day? She's like, you're not wrong. So, it was, that in itself was an adventure, just going from being a newly single person with 2 kids to being surrounded by people constantly. It was like, it's a little overwhelming sometimes. I wanted to work really hard in my therapies because I wanted to get home to my kids. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I worked really hard. The occupational therapists and the speech therapists, they would give me all these exercises, and I'd be like, okay, give me more. Come back, give me more. And, they would say things like, most of our patients don't do this because a lot of people who have a brain injury get very depressed because they don't see a way out or a way better, you know? And I am one of those people who never actually thought that there wasn't a way out. Like, I was like, I am going to get better. Like, it never occurred to me that I wasn't going to get better, that I wasn't going to be able to take care of my children in the way that I always have, to go back to work, to do all the things that I've enjoyed doing and felt fulfilled with.
Yeah, you had that
So
warrior mindset is what I call it, that you're
I,
like, no, this is what we're doing. End of
yeah,
story.
yeah, like it just didn't occur to me. And so it's interesting because I feel like I was bolstered so much by my family and friends. My friend Tara came Monday through Thursday and sat in or Sunday through Thursday and sat in the hospital with me in the evening so that my mom could go take a break and have some dinner, and my dad could come up and we could, spend some time together, things like that. I had friends from near and far coming to see me. It was crazy how many people. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know I knew all these people. I mean, obviously I knew them, but like, when you don't really take stock of all the people in your life and all of the support that is available, being confronted with that is humbling. It was a beautiful thing to know that I was so loved and supported. My mom did Caring Bridge posts, which, if people don't know what that is, it's like a journal kind of thing so that friends and family can know what's going on without the immediate family having to call everyone and explain it. So my mom would post something every single day about my progress. And I mean, I had people in Ireland, I had people in England, I had people everywhere imaginable praying for me and thinking about me and, sending me good vibes, and evidently it worked. I'm really lucky that I had all of that support. Even my brother's friends that I used to babysit, they sent food to my family. They did. I mean, like, everybody did something for me or for my family. And it was just lovely. So, crazy to think about all of it, and that it was 9 years ago now.
Yeah, nothing like a crisis to illuminate the depths of your relationships and the type of relationships that you have and your light. It just makes you see everything different, and then how people respond. Did you have people in your life that didn't respond or were afraid to do anything? And
I did. And this one friend of mine, I remember, like, a couple of years later, I ran into her, and then we ended up having coffee. And she said to me, and she's like, I'm so sorry that I have not contacted you. She's like, I should have, and I was afraid. And so I did not hold that against her at
what was
all.
she afraid of? Did she
I
elaborate on
think
what
she
she was
just
afraid of?
didn't know what to say or what to do. And she didn't know how well I was functioning. And, we were friends, but we were friends because our kids went to the same preschool together.
Mhm.
So, like, and then we became friends. But, we always had really interesting, intelligent conversations.
Mhm.
And so I think her fear was that I couldn't have those kinds of conversations with her anymore. And I think she was afraid to find out. And I don't blame her for that at all. I mean,
Mhm.
I have never been in the reverse situation, so I don't know. I mean, now I know what I would do, but back before my accident, I don't know how I would have responded to that, right?
Yeah.
So,
What do you think was two questions I'm going to throw out there.
okay.
Two-pronged question of what do you think is the most important kind of support that someone can give if they have a friend going through something like that? And what was the most creative thing someone did to help you?
So I think, let's see, the kind of help, just reaching out and saying hi. I mean, like I had people I hadn't seen in 10, 15 years reaching out saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. Because at this particular time, you know, I'm still in the hospital. There isn't a whole lot anyone could do for me there. You know, like, I mean, my mom was there all the time, but like, for the most part, you know, I wasn't getting a ton of visitors because it was overwhelming. And I had a very, very packed day with therapies and they exhausted me. You know, like I would have to take a nap and then go back to therapy. You know, it was exhausting healing from all of that. And so, you know, at that particular time, it was just reaching out or remembering something that I loved as a kid or, you know, even 5 years ago and sending it to me. You know, like my friend Jamie, who I went to high school with, she had been in Massachusetts. She lived in Massachusetts during my accident. She hand knitted me a scarf and sent it to me. And she's like, I've been thinking about you the entire time I have been knitting this. This is, you know, it basically, it was a scarf filled with good thoughts, you know, like, and healing prayers. And so that was completely lovely. The people who could visit me visited me. Just that connection piece, I think, was the most important to me. You know, once I got, so after shock trauma, I went to rehab. So then my days of rehab were even busier. I spent about 2 weeks there. And then I came home. And when I came home, turns out that when you have a traumatic brain injury, you they take away your driver's license. So that made it really difficult to do anything at all. So I had to go get retested for my driver's license. And in the meantime, I mean, I still had my arm all like casted up and they still had to take some things out and put some more things in. And I still had the neck brace on. I was only eating soft foods at this point because I still couldn't swallow things well because of my vocal cords. And so my parents moved in with me and the kids. So I went back to having my kids 60% of the time because we were a 60-40 split at that point. And I went back to having the kids 60% of the time. And my parents took care of all three of us. You know, they moved in for 2.5 months until I could be retested and get a new car because of course I totaled that one that I hydroplaned into the back of the truck trailer with. So you know, and I remember when my parents were there. So my parents come with stuff, like they always have a lot of things. And we lived in a 3-bedroom condo, which was fine. Like it was plenty of space for the 2 kids and I. But then you add in my parents and there's a whole nother layer of stuff. So I remember feeling like this isn't even my home anymore. Like there's other people's things all over the place. And I can't give my daughter a bath because, I mean, to be honest, I couldn't even give myself a bath. at that point. So like my mom had to get in the shower with me because of my arm, and I had to keep my head stable. So, I always appreciate how they stopped their lives for me. They were actually on their way to a trip when they got the call about my accident. So they didn't hesitate to stop their lives and move in with me and the kids for 2.5 months. And I was so ready for them to go when they left. Like, I was so ready. It was hard not to be resentful of needing that kind of help when I have always been incredibly independent and always done everything. I mean, like I always say, I was born an adult. Like nobody really had to take care of me. I just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna do this because your pace is way slower than mine. I'm just gonna take care of this. And to be forced to rest a lot and to have other people take care of me when all I wanted was to get back to my old life was really, really hard.
It had to be humbling that, I mean, your mom in the shower with you. I just can't even imagine how humbling that would be.
Terrible. It was actually worse at the hospital. At least like my shower at home had a little more space. But like I had to get a shower chair because I couldn't stand up in the shower. Like my balance was off, and we had to make sure everything was stable, and we had to cover my arm in plastic. Like everything was a thing. And I'm not really good, or at least I wasn't at the time, good at when everything is like dramatic. I'm like, can we just get this done and get back to what we were doing before?
And was it when you got home from the hospital where you started wrestling with depression, or did that start in the hospital too? You mentioned people with traumatic brain injuries tend to have depression, but that was part of your story also, that you dealt with depression on top of this great thankfulness for your parents and coinciding with the resentment, because I don't want to need them doing all this wonderful stuff for me that I'm thankful. But so where did the depression come in here?
I am not thankful that I have to have them do this, right? So I have struggled with depression on and off since high school. Weirdly, in the hospital, I did not, like, depression was not a thing for me. Like I think I looked at it as, this is the place I need to be in order to get better. And because I knew my kids were safe and I had family and friends surrounding me, I could focus 100% of the time on getting better. Like I didn't usually in my real life, right? But because that wasn't real life. I mean, it was, but not. I had so many things going that not everything got full attention. Or like one thing got full attention and then I'd switch to the next thing, and like but in the hospital, when I was still in acute trauma, I wasn't leaving the hospital. Like I couldn't do anything but get better, and doing my therapies and pushing myself in that way just meant I could leave sooner, right? So I focused 100%. I was all in on getting better and getting to the next place and then getting home. And then I think when I got home, it was like, oh, you mean I still have to rest and stuff?
We're not done yet.
Like I'm not healed. I'm not good. I feel like I should be good. So I even tried, so once my parents left and I got my driver's license back and all of that, I tried to go back to work. And that lasted for about a week and a half. Like every single day I would lose my car in the parking garage. And I pretty much parked in the same spot every day so that I wouldn't lose my car. And yet I lost my car every day. I would come home and I'd be so exhausted, like not just like physically tired, like my brain was tired. And I didn't really even do anything at work because like it was still this whole like, oh my God, Carrie's back. So it was like this whole like, tell me all about it kind of thing, so like after a week and a half, I'm like, I can't do this. I can't function this way. I can't give you what you need for my role. I can't fulfill that right now. I may be able to at some point, but right now I definitely can't. And I certainly can't take care of my kids if I'm trying so hard to do this. So like something's got to give, and my kids aren't going anywhere. So I'm gonna just go back home. So that was really hard for me. That was really hard for me because I found purpose in work. I was good at work. Like for the most part, that was where I had sure footing, right? Mm-hmm. And to realize that I couldn't do that, and I didn't know when I would be able to, was really hard.
Yeah, like in the hospital, you had focusing on getting better and getting home. So you had a good hard focus.
There was a goal.
And then when you got home, then your parents were there and you were working really hard on getting back to work. But then when you got to work, then wait a minute, this isn't going like we planned.
I'm not actually healed. Like, okay. So I went to see a neuropsychologist after that. And two things she said to me. One was, had you been my patient before you went back to work, I would have told you that you weren't ready to go back to work. And I looked at her and I said, and I would have laughed at you and done whatever I wanted anyway, and had to have found out the hard way. And she's like, I can see that. and she said, but recovering from a brain injury is different than recovering from a physical injury, which I had those too. But like she said, your physical injuries, you know when to stop because your hand hurts, or you've done something, right? Like, so your body says, ow, it hurts. For a brain injury, the only thing it has is fatigue, right? And I have made it my life's mission to push past fatigue my whole life. So like, to know that that was not going to work anymore was really overwhelming for me. So I had to work really hard to come to terms with needing to rest and listening to the exhaustion in my head, not just physical pain, to go, all right, yeah, I did too much. And to learn what my triggers were, like, what activity is going to cause me the most brain fatigue? Can I, one, either avoid it, or two, build in time around it so that I can have adequate rest, right? So for instance, every summer, pretty much the kids and I drive to Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, and that's about 3-4 hours away. And it's very, very stressful for me. Driving in general on highways is very stressful. In fact, I don't drive anywhere with women in my passenger seat. My kids, for some reason, I'm okay, but because in my accident, my coworker Emily was in the car with me, I do not like to drive another woman. And if my friends and I are going someplace together, like a girls' trip, I'll say, I'm happy to pay for gas. Someone else is going to have to drive. And you will all be grateful for that. Because I can then get to where I'm going and be relaxed and not, because I'm not stressed out if somebody else is driving. I'm stressed out if I'm driving because I was driving in that accident. But anytime driving on the highway, if there are a lot of big trucks, I know that is a trigger for me, and that I will have to give myself adequate time to rest after that in order to be able to function appropriately the next day. Or so it depends on, like, I've had to learn, like, how much time is this going to take, right? So if it's a 3-hour drive, probably going to be a half a day before I'm feeling like I'm okay. And I'm going to have to rest that half a day and, like, sit around and maybe chat with people, but not like boat or swim in the lake or whatever. Like, that's too much. Mm-hmm. Too much. So if I can find somebody else to drive for me, I always choose that. But if I have to drive, then I do, and I just have to make accommodations for myself. So I have learned over time when and where and how to make those accommodations.
Okay. So what did you do to help yourself overcome the depression that you were dealing with at that time also? Not just the trauma responses with the fatigue and that, but the emotional depression part of it. How did you overcome that?
So that's been a lifelong journey. But in the beginning, when I got home, I started writing. And so I wrote a blog, and, my mom had done the Caring Bridge post. And so people, like, I already had an audience, which I didn't even care about. I just wanted to write about what I was feeling and how things were going. And that was my way of processing everything. And my thoughts were always, if I can process these really difficult moments in my life, maybe, and then I'm sharing them with the world, or however many people are reading this, if one person finds a nugget of something that can help them and provide them hope in whatever struggle they're having, then it is worth it to me to be vulnerable in this way, so writing really, really helped. Over the years, I started meditating, which has been a huge help. I'm up to like 30 minutes a day, which for somebody who didn't know how to rest, even like 5 minutes, that was a long process to be able, like, I started with a minute of meditation. Like,
that's how I started, with 1 minute.
Like, I'm not like, to sit still for 30 minutes and like clear my mind. Are you kidding? But I can do it now. And it has made a tremendous difference in my physical and mental well-being. I work out a ton because I always I always say that exercise for me is my sanity.
Well,
And that
exercise
wasn't,
releases endorphins, so you're
mm-hmm.
getting hormones to help you be
Yeah.
happier.
And that was a really hard thing too with, again, while I was in the hospital, it didn't really register that I wasn't exercising every day, right? Because I was getting better. But then when I got home, I had to very, very slowly get back into working out. And it was months. And, I worked out 5 or 6 times a week. Like, it was hard for for me to not exercise. And then I would have like another surgery. And so then I'd have to take 2 or 3 weeks off. And that was really difficult. So, physical movement has always been something that has helped my mental health. I've done a lot of restorative yoga too, which is a lot like meditation, but different poses but really, really slow. And again, pushing against my grain of, all right, I am purposefully slowing down. Like, this
Intention.
is, yeah,
Intention, being
yeah.
intentional.
And that's hard. It is hard for me to slow down. It still is. I have to like stop myself even now and go, really don't need to be doing all the things all the time, all at once. Like,
Reminders,
yeah,
self-reminders. Yeah.
right. Exactly. So, those things have been really beneficial. Acupuncture has been amazing, both for my physical and mental health.
Mm.
Again, I am forced for 30 minutes to rest every week because I've got needles in me and I'm not moving. Right? So like it helps with the pain in my hand, but it also like allows me to connect with my body. And I talk about it with my acupuncturist before my session. So, she knows what's been going on with me. And if I'm super stressed out, she'll tweak things a little bit. Or if, my hand hurts really badly, it will focus on that, So it has been nice in that I can communicate these things, but also the forced rest. and now it's like my favorite part of the week. So I feel like maybe I've turned a corner on the resting thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. It is very productive. We do need rest, and then how much we need sleep. People don't realize how beneficial, how necessary sleep is to our lives. So what is something that you want to make sure that the people remember from their time of listening to your story today?
I would say the most important thing is that there's always hope. If you don't have support, with family and friends like I did, I know that I was very fortunate with that. And there are a lot of people who don't have that kind of very involved support. It's important to make sure that you see a therapist or a coach or someone or a support group to talk to other people who have had traumatic experiences. Somebody who hasn't been through a trauma like that, or like any kind of trauma, has a hard time relating. And like, I remember part of the thing I had the worst time with was I always felt like I was a spectacle, like I was on display. Every time I would go somewhere and I would see people that I knew, it was, oh my God, you're such a miracle. And that to me just made me want to take 10 steps back. Because I think a lot went into that miracle. Um, and also, I didn't want that kind of attention. The kind of
Mhm.
attention that I wanted was, oh, you've recovered and you are doing what you did before. Or like I wanted recognition for how well I did my job or how well I raised my children. I didn't want recognition for something that wasn't just me, right? Like my recovery, yeah, I worked really, really hard on recovering, but I also had amazing surgeons. I had amazing doctors. I had amazing support. And it is very overwhelming to be given this like title of miracle and like please no. So like I think that is important to acknowledge too, that sometimes people don't know what to say
Mhm.
when you've had a trauma like that or any kind of trauma. People don't know what to say. And that you have survived seems like a miracle, right? And the part that's difficult is being a miracle also seems like, oh, I'm fine now. But reality is I'm not fine now. I like still have to accommodate for these things. I still have to do all of these things in the background to make it look like I'm fine. So you calling me a miracle puts a lot of pressure on me. And so I think that I'm not the only person to feel that way, right? Um,
It's like wrapping
you
your
know,
head around, what does that word mean to you?
right,
In another podcast interview I had recently, we paused and we were talking about what the words mean. And he was talking about how much we could change the world if people would discuss, well, what do you mean by that? When you say this,
right,
what do you mean by that? Well, you call me a miracle. What do you mean by that? My perception of that is this. Oh, well, I just
right,
mean this. It's like, well, maybe I'd rather you call it, something else, some other word you come
right.
up with like that, and to
So, and
talk your
that
way
was,
through that.
yeah, and that is a fabulous idea. And at that particular time, because I was just fairly new out of the hospital, I wasn't in a place to have those
Oh,
conversations.
right,
So,
right.
like anytime I went someplace and there were a lot of people, I was so overwhelmed because everybody wanted to like, it was like they all wanted to touch me. I was like the new baby, right? And
Oh,
it just
wow.
felt like lots of hugs and like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And I'm like, okay, stop touching me. I need to go now. And I was not like, it's the same thing with my parents living at my house. I was appreciative of
Mhm.
the well wishes and the gladness that I saw in people's faces that I'm alive and they're seeing me and all of these things. And it felt very heavy in expectation. Like, okay, so you're calling me a miracle and you're all happy I'm here. Like, what do you want from me? And I think I'm not the only person to go through that.
Well, that's a good thing to bring up, because it's not that probably a lot of people wouldn't think of that. Well, like you said, if
Right,
you have not been through that. So it's really good to bring up that one aspect of that for people to be maybe a little less intense,
yes.
a
And that's
little less
exactly what it was.
intense. Maybe that's a good thing to say to people when you have someone in your life that is going through something. Be a little less intense, maybe
Yeah,
more
or
gentle, and kind of like if you're going swimming, a lot of times people, there are those who will just jump in the pool, but a lot of times they stop and test the water.
right,
How cold
right,
is this? Maybe test the water with the people. who you're listening, you have someone going through something,
Yeah.
test the water a little bit. Just say, hey, how are you doing? I'm really glad you're alive, and how are you doing with this? Or just get a little somehow to test the water of how to respond in a way that would serve you instead of overwhelming you.
Yes. And I think that's what it was. I mean, some people certainly did ask me, like, how are you doing? But I think in a larger scale, it was like, oh my God, you're doing so well. This is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, that's your story, not mine. But I was so overwhelmed that I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't stop anyone and say,
Right. It
hang
was too
on,
early in
you're
the
like,
process.
you're putting a lot of pressure on me to be like completely well, and I'm not. Because I looked well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like somebody who has had a miscarriage or is a survivor of sexual abuse. You're not seeing that on the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah. You
I
don't see
mean, you don't
definitely.
see that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think nobody really knows what's going on in another person
Yeah.
unless
They tell you.
they're open to asking and paying attention to social cues and knowing, like, not being intense, right? Like
Yeah.
being very gentle, like, oh, I know you've had a really hard time. Do you want to talk about it? And then sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah.
And that's okay,
Yeah. It can be
because
exhausting to talk about it.
you may want to talk about it 6 months from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're in a different place, knowing that that one person reached out to you and said, hey, I'm here if you want to talk, but I'm not going to pressure you to tell me about like how you're a miracle.
Yeah. That's
um,
awesome. You have a book that you're working on. Is it about this specific situation
it
you've been
is,
through? Oh,
it
and
is actually,
when can we
it's called
expect that?
It is called Trauma is a Catalyst, and I'm hoping it'll be out in January. We just did the first round of edits.
Mm,
So I am like eagerly awaiting next steps. The book is broken up into 3 parts. The first part is actually my mom's journal entries to Caring Bridge. Um, and then the second part is my blog from when I was initially healing and how I processed through everything then. And then the third part is now, how I have adjusted. And 9 years later, looking back on it, how have I come through all of this?
yeah, how you've taken ownership and gotten to where you are now over
Yeah,
these 9 years that you're doing
yeah,
so much better, and you're still working on stuff you had told me. So
yeah,
you're still a work in progress.
absolutely.
Then we're all a work in progress in some way.
Right, right,
So,
absolutely. And
so how can people
I
connect with you?
so people can connect with me through my website, which is www.nomis, NOMIS, advisors.com. And you can schedule a coffee, or I am a coach and I am working with trauma survivors to kind of help people go from that where you were before the trauma to where you are now and where you want to be. So like building that roadmap and supporting people through that journey from somebody who knows what surviving trauma is, and how hard of a process that is.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, and also people can, I just finished my first season of my podcast, Transformational Trauma and Healing. So everyone can listen there. And that is actually, so the first one and like 9 or 11 is my story, but all the others in there are either other people's trauma stories, and then them sharing how they came through their own survival, or resources, people who work with trauma survivors. So like my acupuncturist is on there, and my speech therapist from when I was going through in the hospital. But then I've had someone who survived a terrorist attack. I've had a woman with a child in the NICU. I've had all kinds of trauma survivors on there. And so it's been really wonderful for me to get to share those stories with a greater population, not just share my story, but share other people's stories. Because again, the same thing is important with sharing my stories, with sharing other stories, is if we can provide hope and recognition, like, oh, somebody's been through something similar to me, or somebody struggled in the same way, even though our trauma was different. If somebody can gain just a small nugget of hope from listening to those stories, then everything I'm doing is worth it.
Amen. And before we sign off here, tell us, what's the name of your podcast again?
My podcast is Transformational Trauma and Healing, and it can be found on Apple, Spotify, Google, any of where you get your podcast material. And then my book coming up is Trauma is a Catalyst.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today and sharing your story and these nuggets of wisdom of how to help people through their trauma. And so thank you, listeners, for being with us today. And so until next time, I love you.